Ben Dhiman, it's a pleasure to have you for the first time on the Singletrack podcast. And one thing I want to say before we get into it, written athlete blogs are sort of an endangered species in our sport. And yours is one of the few great ones out there these days. I've gotten a lot of inspiration from reading it. So I guess, we'll link to it in the show notes, but just wanted to express some gratitude that you're sort of working with the garage door open and giving people not just a peek into how you train, but there's a lot of advice that you offer in the process that I think it's just a great resource. So thank you so much.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's a passion of mine to write, and it's a passion of mine also to share with the world in a medium that suits the real attributes of this progress of being an athlete. And we only have so many tools in the toolbox, but I find sitting down, writing a blog, it helps me as well. But in the end, you wind up with a product which hopefully can stick around a bit, has a bit of longevity. So thank you.
There's a lot that I want to talk with you about when it comes to your buildup for this race and just how you plan to execute on race day. But I think you might be a relatively new person to a lot of listeners, just when it comes to sort of like the pro athlete scene or the aspiring pro athlete scene in our sport. From what I understand, you're an American expat. You're based over in Europe, somewhere in the Pyrenees. What's the elevator story, the short story about how you got there? Was it work? Was it play? A relationship? How'd you land over there?
Yeah, it's not a short story at all, but I'm happy to share about it. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. I graduated high school over there, and then was like pretty hardcore vagabond through my 20s in America. I was a through hiker, traveler. I wound up finishing my university degree at Montana State University, College of Agriculture, Sustainable Food Production. And I became just rabidly obsessed with long distance travel on foot, and wound up doing, right after I finished university, did the Continental Divide Trail 2016. And the bug just stayed with me, man. You couldn't put me to work more than a couple months. So I just work my ass off, save up some money, squirrel away the dimes, and let loose in the landscape. So come 2017, I did a couple trail races in the States. I did San Juan Solstice. I did the High Lonesome the inaugural year. I did the Idaho I'm Tough Mountain Festival, but these were all based off hiking fitness and was there for the adventure, for the real pursuit of pushing the limits of endurance. And I really continued my rambling afterwards. Had a good job in Yellowstone National Park in the winter as a ski guide in a remote camp in Canyon Village, and was able to basically support my hiking habit obsession. So the course was sinuous, but essentially what happened is 2018, I went to Nepal to try the Great Himalayan Trail, the high route across Nepal, and successfully made it with my life. And it was an incredible experience. I pushed over to India, was there for a while in the Himalaya, and then I met a girl. And I met a French girl, and we started traveling together. I sort of hung up the hiking boots. I was beat. And that's essentially the roots of it. I mean, COVID sort of really put an end to the rambling as well. And we decided to have a family. Well, it wasn't so much a decision as what ended up happening. She got pregnant in Australia. We decided to move to France and start our life here. So I've been living in France for 2.5 years, and I currently live in the Haute-Pyrenees, which is in the middle of the chain on the French side. And that brings us here. That's the long and the short of it.
This episode is brought to you by Oladance, wireless Bluetooth headphones which deliver 19 hours of battery life, superior sound, the ability to still hear your surroundings for safety, and an open ear design so you don't get that achy feeling from wearing them for extended periods. I used these earlier this month on my run of the 100-mile wilderness. And if you're curious, head over to oladance.com/ST and use code ST at checkout for $30 off their OWS2 headphones. Also, thanks to Pillar Performance, Pillar spelled Pillar, is a sports micronutrition company that I was introduced to after having Sam Parsons from Tin Man Elite on the show a while back. I use their pineapple coconut flavored triple magnesium product, which delivers high potency magnesium glycinate for better sleep and added recovery during my training blocks. If you'd like to try Pillar today and you're an American-based listener, head to thefeed.com/pillar and use code Singletrack for 15% off your order. For international listeners, use that same code Singletrack for 15% off, but go to pillarperformance.shop to do so. I love all of that. I especially love the through hiking lineage. I myself got into the sport via a through hike of the Appalachian Trail back in 2014. And I joke with friends and listeners that ever since I've been microdosing the through hiking experience via ultra trail running ever since. There's definitely a lot more to get into there, but for the sake of this interview, I do want to talk about the lead up and your execution with UTMB, starting with what you did back in late June. I think while a lot of eyes were fixated on Western States and Broken Arrow stuff over here in America, you were over at the UTMB Andorra race. A couple notable things, excuse me. You tied for first place. You set a course record formerly held by Zach Miller. You notably beat Pau Capel, who took third that day. By the way, that reminds me, you took down a Hannes Namberger CR at Peñagolosa earlier this year. So all of that has been so impressive. And I think we'll get into the nuts and bolts of your ascendancy in the sport soon. But I think the first thing I have to ask you about, because it's such an interesting topic, is the philosophy of tying for first place. How do you think about this circumstance and opting against the decision to race all the way to the finish?
That was a very particular circumstance. There's no philosophy. It was, in general, I'd say my friends would probably say that I'm not the kind of guy to ever do something like that. But that was a hellacious day, man. Extremely hot, extremely tough course. The year previous when Zach did it, they did it through the night, which presents its own set of challenges, obviously. But we were battling like pretty high temps. I think it topped out around 35 C, which is in the 90s Fahrenheit, and it's high altitude, nowhere to hide from the sun. I think just the general suffering kind of created some weird bond between myself and Jean-Philippe. And he's the senior to me, like he's been in the trail world for a long time. We've been pushing each other at different moments. He had a big gap at the beginning. I closed him on a very long, hard climb, which I had decided before the race, that's where I'm going to make my move. So what ended up happening, we rolled into the last aid station together. We'd rolled into like 4 or 5 together, like in a row. And finally we arrived, and he just asked me in French, like, we finished together. And I was like, hey, it's kind of your call, man. Like, if you want to finish together, I'm okay with that. And he's like, let's do it. So, I mean, we kind of saved each other some battle to the death in the last 8K, which is relatively flat. And crossed the line hand in hand. And yeah, it's just sort of a spontaneous thing. I don't know if I'd ever do it again, but I have no regrets about it. It was a good moment.
Right on. Well, you have gone from incognito, or as we called it, Singletrack, a random baller, to a dangerous asset or a known entity in the sport of the last year, especially here in 2023. And you have a quote from one of your recent blog posts that I want to read aloud and ask you about here. You say, quote, 2022 went better than planned. It was, however, not enough. One level gives way to the next, one dream to the next. What was impossible is within grasp, right there, gotta have it. In order to improve, one must work hard. In order to turn hard work into success, one must have 3 things: love, fear, and time, end quote. And I loved that section of the post. Give us more explanation on those 3 components: the love, the fear, and the time. What do you mean there? And how do those 3 components factor into training and racing well for you?
Yeah. It wasn't like a long-term goal of mine to become like a champion in the sport, but I've always been a competitive person who loves sport. And I'd say really the stimulus behind what's happened with me is the family. Like, it's just, we had a family and we're trying to put food on the table. And when I arrived in France, I didn't even have the right to work here. When you arrive with certain visa status, you have to wait. And I'm just taking care of the baby. My wife's going to work. I'm thinking like Like, what can I do? And I mean, I've been running pretty hard for a minute there, but I just, running is me. I just love the thing. So when it comes to actually getting good, you have to be completely in. You have to be all in. So in order to do that, you have to have a serious passion for the thing, like a thing that never dies. You're exhausted. You don't have energy. You don't have food in your belly. You don't have sleep. And you got to go out. You got to get the session done. And the only way to do that on a sustainable basis is to love it, to like love the suffering of it, to love the moments you have in the mountains. So you have to just from a baseline be obsessed. And then, I'd say the fear is you, when you have a family there, you got to do your best. You can't give anything except your very best. So it's really just a fear of not being able to succeed, which then enables you to push harder in training. And then in races, when the time comes, just be willing to just clamp down and go to the next level and really, really, really buckle down for it. And then time, look, the sport takes a hell of a lot of time out of you. You got to create time. You got to make it happen. So it's self-evident. If you want to win big races, you better be willing to train pretty long hours.
Thanks to Brooks for their support of our UTMB coverage. I used their Cascadia 8 way back in 2014 when I was introduced to trails during my thru hike of the Appalachian Trail. So this is pretty cool. I've been using their new High Point collection in the field, even during these interviews, as you can see here, particularly their waterproof rain jacket and pants. I think they work well in settings beyond inclement weather. They're just comfortable. They're stylish. I've also been wearing the new and improved Cascadia 17. Everything is on point. Head over to brooksrunning.com/Singletrack to check it all out. Also, thanks to Morton. Morton fueled over 80% of my run during the 100-mile wilderness earlier this month. I used 25 of their hydrogels and 10 of their 225 C-bars. They all went down easy, never created palate fatigue, and made me feel good, I think, in large part because of the natural ingredients. These are also the same products used by top athletes like Tom Evans and Kilian Jornet. So head over to Morton.com to take a look and maybe even try some of it all for yourself. I came across a mantra in your blog that I loved. You say, train to train tomorrow. But I'm bringing this up because at the same time, you also talk a lot about the allure of this, call it high risk, high reward, simultaneous increase of volume and intensity, and that you have followed that latter strategy at times with a lot of success. So what I'm curious about is like when you think about progression and maximizing performance and reaching as close as possible to your potential in the sport, where do you currently stand in this debate of conservative versus like more of that go big or go home style training? Like, is the risk taking, in your opinion, necessary to get as close as possible to the higher echelons of the sport?
Yeah, for sure. You have to be willing to throw down from time to time, but not every day. And also, I'd say like what I learned most this year, where I've really, because last year I did okay, I didn't do great, I did all right, but last year, I mean, I didn't have like the kind of time and dedication that I had like this year. My fire was really lit after the Grand Raid. I was just like, okay, let's just do this thing. Let's go. Like it's there. I can keep pushing. I can do much better. But essentially, the build up to that race, that was October of last year. I just did 2 giant months. I just did like, I don't know, like maybe 130, 150 miles a week, 40,000 feet of climbing, just, while with the family, trying to hold down the fort over here. It was super, super hard. And there was no way of knowing that it was going to transfer to a race. So that I'd say what I learned is that it's not about creating these giant peak volume phases. It's about like choosing your time, choosing like, okay, well, the legs are starting to come back, and maybe Tuesday I'll hammer some super hard threshold workout going uphill. But then, I want to turn that around and then do something again hard on Thursday. But meanwhile, Wednesday, I still want to train easy. So it's being willing to take a risk on a particular day, but creating a lifestyle where you can do these repeatable hard efforts over time. Hard efforts that you can recover from. Like I understand now I can recover from certain things, which in the past I wouldn't be able to recover from. It's a long project where you have to bide your time, figure out where you can take your risks. But essentially it boils down to doing some hard things during the week. You have to take some risks in terms of the workouts you do. But I wouldn't say taking too big of a risk with ramping all of this simultaneously. You have to really try to extrapolate as far as you can out and find that line. But yeah, from time to time, man, you got to crack the whip. You got to go for it. There's a lot of like zone 2 time on feet. That's nonsense. You've got to crack the whip from time to time. And then the rest, sure. Get out there and hike around, wear a backpack, do something like that. But it's a dangerous game. You have to be willing, because it's interesting. You talk to Tom Evans and stuff. I listened to his interview he gave after UTMB. And his game apparently was to do the minimal amount to achieve the adaptations he was looking for. And
yeah,
I think that's great, but that's super hard to know what the minimum dose is. It's very, very difficult. So sometimes I wake up with a fire in my belly, usually when I don't feel that great. And those are the days when I really get after it. And it's just a long-term strategy, I'd say, with creating a body and a lifestyle that can sustain that.
I want to read another quote from your blog here. This was the post you made after you did some recon on the UTMB course. You say, quote, "When I reflect on the 4 days spent circumnavigating the Mont Blanc Massif, I understand the hype, the draw, the broken dreams, the durable champions. It makes sense that to win here, you must have great physical capacity and somehow eclipse what you feel is possible without dying. That you have to run very smart and very hard. UTMB is a lethal combination of speed and mountain," end quote. And so with all that said, what's been your blueprint for prepping for this race, and how far back does it go? Like what's in your figurative and literal gearboxes for UTMB? This episode is also made possible by Features, makers of my favorite trail running socks. They're durable, they're stylish, and they're comfortable. They're trusted by many of the best athletes in our sport. So if you'd like to give them a try, head over to their website, grab a few pairs, and use code Singletrack20 at checkout for 20% off your next order. Also, thanks to Kodiak Cakes, makers of my favorite pancakes. Kodiak has been at the center of so many memorable post-long run group breakfasts for me. And I don't just rave about the great taste. They are also 100% whole grain, and they're packed with 14 grams of protein per serving. That helps immediately with the recovery process. So head over to their website, get yourself a few boxes of their mix, and use code Singletrack15 at checkout for 15% off your next order.
Yeah. I wasn't even planning on doing it until I have a training partner here in the village that I train in, and he was 4th at Andorra this year. So we train together like once a week. He was saying, I'm doing UTMB. As soon as you start talking to sponsors, you gonna do UTMB? And you realize like there's only one place where all the marbles are there. It's the biggest thing you can do in our sport. So I started looking into it, and like when you have this, I'd say it's normal among thru hikers to be a bit anti-institutional. So I was a bit resistant to this idea of going to the biggest circus and sports show in our sport. But then I caught the bug. I just did some research. I seen like how there's no test like this where you can really run on a mountain course, like a true mountain course, but you can run. And this is a really cool thing. So for me, it's this weird mixture. You have like a fitness test, like on all these climbs. It's not terrain dictating how slow you have to go. It's like, hey, if you got legs, kick, go. And so what basically happened, decided I was going to do it. And then for me, my thing is, okay, well, you're going to have to run. Well, we need to work continuously on the running, particularly uphill. And at the same time, we have to develop a resiliency in the mountains. So I base a lot of my training on those two things. Where I live is very easy to access both of those things as well. We have right next to us is the famous, where I live, the village is called Bagnères de Bigorre, and there is a col called the Col de Tourmalet, which is a famous col in the Tour de France. So the road climbs 5,000, 6,000 feet. So if you want a hell of a session, you go run that road. And that kind of stuff is like UTMB training. So for me, plan is figure out some workouts which is going to give you good running power uphill, some good tolerance, threshold tolerance, and at the same time, get out and work hard in the mountains. Enjoy the mountains, but work hard. Choose cool lines, have fun, but be willing to suffer as well. So it's really a combination of emphasizing continuously, reinforcing uphill running with mountain strength.
You say that your principal objective is to give the field, quote, a run for their money, end quote, at UTMB. I love that. I love setting intentions pretty publicly out there. But practically speaking, what does this look like on race day? Like when you think about how you will race, are you going to be there at the front being dragged by whatever people like Jim Walmsley and Tom Evans and Mathieu Blanchard want to do? Or do you sort of have this sense of what the splits will be at each key spot on the course, what the ultimate finishing times will be, and then you sort of reverse engineer that and you run your own race? Like, how do you think about all that?
No, I reckon I can run with those guys. So I'm just going to try and get in the mix. Like, I don't think you can sit back too much in UTMB. You can sit back a bit. You know, another champion who lives not too far from here is Benyat Marmisol. He, he's spectacular at guarding his energy, holding on to it, and then just starting to like lay it down later in the race, especially. And he just doesn't.
Saw it at Hard Rock.
Yeah. He doesn't slow down much. So he can keep this very linear effort and speed, which he took 6th last year at UTMB. He wasn't far from Zach or Jim. And he essentially sat back until Champe, He sat back until the fully, basically. And then he started kicking a bit. But, I mean, at the end, if you've got legs after that, you're going to catch people who are destroyed. But me, I don't really think I'm that kind of runner. I prefer to have contact with I just prefer to be up there in the mix, having fun, mixing it up. So yeah, I'm going to go out there and try and run with those guys. And look, if it doesn't feel sustainable, I'll pull back a bit, but I don't think it's going to be anything too wild. I mean, maybe Jim goes wild, I don't know, but the rest of those guys like Tom and Mathieu, like they're spectacular runners, extremely strong, but I'm sure I can hang with them.
Are you someone that deals with imposter syndrome at all, or do you derive a lot of confidence as you're stacking race results and you're stacking training, and you just trust that what you've done is going to be successful? Like there's that, you mentioned in your blog, like the John Kelly quote where, by the time you hit the start line, 90% of the race is done because it's all, you did all that stuff in training. It's just the last, 5 or 10% to celebrate. So
yeah,
how do you think about all that?
That's totally just having faith in which is not easy to do, but like, it's true. If you've been working hard, you'd be all right, as long as you don't like immolate yourself before get sick or do something stupid, But I think it's not imposter syndrome, but it is outsider syndrome. Like I just haven't been in the inside club, like in the sport. So when I'm coming in, my name's fresh. There's a sort of like a little bit of this me versus them attitude, but that's good to have too. Because I mean, in a race, like you need to find different sources of fuel. Anger is not the word, but it's this little chip on your shoulder, which you can use from time to time. That's not going to last for 100 miles, but like you have to use different, but look, I got to run like how many, like maybe 80K with Courtney in Reunion Island. And you start to see like the Jedi Master figure out how to pull energy out of everything. Like you realize that you have to be extremely open to the experience. And as things are coming your way, you got to start turning that into fuel. Like she was turning everything into fuel. Pain, attention, all that, like anything you can think of. It's just becoming fuel. It's just incredible to watch. And so yeah, I mean, I think I hope at least that you can just try and find multiple fuel sources during the race, and if it comes down to just having a chip on your shoulder, that's not bad to have.
I love the outsider syndrome perspective. It's fleeting, especially if you are on this ascendancy. It's fleeting, so you got to cherish it while it's there. One of my favorite quotes, by the way, is "Chips on shoulders, put chips in pockets." So
Yeah.
I hope you can you can feel that on race day. Last question I have for you, because just via your blog, you come across as just a really thoughtful person. What is your content diet like when you think about what you read, what you watch, what you listen to? What are your go-tos for just becoming a more like informed athlete in the sport? And what interests you?
What interests me? I still read every night. That's fantastic. But I'm not really any different than what I would imagine most people are. I kind of get delivered the information that I've cultivated in the algorithm. So, I mean, it understands that I'm interested in athletics. I like studying the triathlon a lot because, like, it's a more mature professional sport. Like, the trail, it looks like trails heading that direction.
Yep.
But in terms of just everything, from just how the athletes become entrepreneurs to like this obsession with micro data and training. Me, I'm always on the look. I mean, I love champions of all sports. I follow a lot of track and field. Follow golf. Follow, like I love sports. So I try and watch a bunch of stuff, whether it's road racing or whatever. I love highlight videos, things of that nature.
Right on. Well, Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. We'll make sure to link to the blog, the rest of your socials, and your Strava in the show notes. Anything that you want to leave listeners and viewers with before we go?
I could say some big things. I don't know if I want to. Yeah, why not? I hope people, like, I've found such joy in having big objectives. Like, it's such a gift, even if it's not always perfect. Like, it's just beautiful to have this thing, this drive, something to look forward to, something that you're pushing towards. So, I mean, just set big goals. Just go for it and try and make something of it, because it's just a pleasure to wake up with a sense of purpose. So, yeah, have fun.